It could be Javier Dominguez. Look, he's the one that's the favorite right now. He's got a huge edge in terms of the match situation. He only needs to win one match.
Yeah, this is the absolute dream scenario for Javier Dominguez. Didn't like his outlook in the top 8. He had to fight through a bunch of Oko decks, but was able to do so. And then now, things are looking a lot easier. He's going up against the deck that he specifically built his deck to beat, and he has a one-match advantage. Jean-Emmanuel Depraz needs to win 2 matches in a row to be able to be the Mythic Championship here. It's
going to take a miracle here for Jean-Emmanuel, right? I mean, the truth is that he already has a matchup that he would prefer not to be in. Calling it horrible is probably a bit of a stretch, but, you know, it's not a good matchup for Jean-Emmanuel, and he has to do it twice.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the Gruul deck lose. We've seen specifically Javier Dominguez lose to this Bant deck before. In day 1, at the end, he played against Sebastian Pozzo, and Pozzo, you know, the Bant Golos deck has the ability to get those explosive starts with Arboreal Grazer, Growth Spiral, Circuitous Root. It can really just put a ton of pressure on the battlefield very, very quickly. So,
speaking of a ton of pressure here, Paul, this Once Upon a Time is digging for an untapped green source desperately, and he finds it. There's a forest off of the Once Upon a Time and a Pelt Collector, his ideal turn 1 play here. Once Upon a Time as well here for Jean-Emmanuel. Looks like he's just looking for lands.
yeah, although it looked, I mean, I think he might want to just go ahead and take the Realm Cloak Giant here. He has 4 lands. The deck plays 29 lands, and he already has 3 in hand, so very, very likely to find mana source number 5 to be able to play that Realm Cloak Giant. And having a sweeper is very, very important.
How bad is it that Javier gets to know about it?
The thing is, Javier's already going to play around it.
So not that big of a deal.
So it's not that big.
Paradise Druid, wow, what a great one for Javier Dominguez. He actually didn't have a 2-drop to play that turn until finding the Druid, and now he gets to curve. Oh, actually, I lied. He did have Zertog Goblin that he could have ran out, but instead, he's going to play the Druid, which lets him get into Questing Beast and then into Skargan Hellkite. So still really nice rip for him.
Yeah, Javier really wanted to find a land there. He wants to curve out. He's got that Questing Beast. He's got that Skargan Hellkite. I mean, he had the option of running out a 3/3. Oh, no, he can still do it here, of course.
Yeah, but that's because he found that land off of that second copy of Once Upon a Time, and that lets the Pelt Collector start to attack. The Hydroid Krasis as a 2/2, that's just to make sure that he has something to do this turn. Instead, though, it looks like it's just going to soak up the 3, the Arboreal Grazer.
And I don't know if Javier is going to look to run out any more threats onto the battlefield because the Depraz is 1 mana shy of running out that sweeper, and John didn't find land number 5 here, but of course, because of that Circuitous Route, he will be able to run that out the next turn. That was actually a really big draw here from Depraz.
I was going to say that.
Oftentimes, you can play around the first Wrath, but most of the time, you just don't play around the second one. It's pretty unlikely that it'll happen, and it's pretty hard to be able to sandbag enough creatures where you can kind of play around both.
A Pelt Collector, well, maybe perhaps not quite right on time here, but as you mentioned, at this point, Javier not super incentivized to keep adding to the board. He can take these next couple of turns to just get in a bunch of damage and maybe even aid that with the help of some Collision Colossus action.
Yeah, Javier really wanted something like an Embercleave here. That would have been ideal because that allows him to put a permanent on the battlefield that actually wouldn't go away even if Depraz plays one of his 2 sweepers.
The mana situation a little awkward for Javier at this point. He does have double red thanks to the Paradise Druid, but then he wouldn't be attacking with it. So things a little bit weird here for Javier, but at any rate, this turn, it's just all about attack, so he's going to jam in there with everything.
And Javier likely to block here. Oh no, it looks like he's actually just choosing to take the damage here, and this tells me that he's likely going to want to play out Time Wipe to save Hydroid Krasis and get a little additional value.
Okay. Temple Garden off the top of the library here. There's no Field of the Dead in sight just yet, but we're not really to that point. And of course, the attack from Dominguez signifies a sweeper. And he is going to know, this is somewhat interesting because as you mentioned, sometimes they say, well, I'm not going to bother playing around a second sweeper, but as you also said, Paul, it's also often the case that they just can't.
Yeah, and that was really, really big draw here from Javier. Absolutely needed to find that untapped land to get in for some damage here. So now, Depraz down to 7. Javier has a ton of haste creatures that are really difficult to block, and he still has that Collision Colossus that could be very, very crucial in sneaking in the last few points of damage.
Yeah, Jean-Emmanuel's kind of forced to run out Agent of Treachery here to steal the Questing Beast. He can, of course, get the offense going on his side, but, you know, a land off the top for the Hellkite would be great, and there it is.
That is big.
Javier can force the issue once again, get in for 4, and threaten lethal the next turn, really forcing Jean-Emmanuel to have that, to cast that Realm Cloak Giant, the cast-off section of it.
Yeah, he could also just run out a Hydrate Krasis here for 5, but that means he's just dead to Collision Colossus. So the safer thing to do is just run out the Realm Cloak Giant here, and then just hope that Javier doesn't have a follow-up haste creature. Of course, Javier's deck is full of 3-power haste creatures, right? You have the Gruul Spellbreaker, you have Questing Beast, you have Skargan Hellkite. Heck, even a Zertog Goblin with that Collision Colossus in hand would mean that that would be a lethal attack. So this is a big turning from John.
Really want to see what Jean-Emmanuel comes up with here. The numbers don't quite line up for him here. Let's see.
Those back-to-back land draws were huge for Javier.
Yeah. So if he goes for the Krasis, he can do it for 5. He'll gain 2, go to 5. If he blocks the Skargan Hellkite, it can become 8 power. But he'll only take 3, so he will survive.
That was a Plaza of Harmony, and he has... That's an Orzhov Guildgate and a Boros Guildgate. So, so that puts him up to 8.
Yeah, he's actually out of range for most reasonable things at this point.
Maybe an Embercleave would do it here?
Stomping Ground was the draw step for him.
Wow, so close.
Yeah, Jean-Emmanuel Depraz doing a great job of getting that life total as high as possible.
So now Javier, you know, he needs to find a way to close this game out. He gets in more damage if he just uses Collision to get that Hydrate Krasis off the battlefield and just attack for 4.
Easy block here for Jean-Emmanuel, and that's going to be +4/+2, so that will get it bigger than the Krasis. He'll even take 3. So back down to 5, but critically, he's left himself a Skargan Hellkite and is no longer facing a flying threat. Huh, he ran out the Pelt Collector.
Wouldn't it have dealt 1 more damage if he dealt 6 damage to the Krasis? Does it deal 6 damage to the Krasis? Collision Colossus? I believe it does.
Oh, if he just would have killed it.
Right.
Yes.
And then that would have put himself in a position where if he draws another Questing Beast or Skargan Hellkite off the top, could have potentially won.
You are correct about that. Now, he also ran out the Pelt Collector, even though he knows about the Realm Cloak Giant. And we're going to see an attack here from Jean-Emmanuel, who is going to cast off this turn.
Possibly a Time Wipe, actually, right? Time Wipe, bounce your Agent of Treachery.
Didn't even see the Time Wipe, yeah.
Let's... And now Javier, I don't know if he has a way to deal 5 damage. Everything hits in chunks of 4.
It's going to have to be a combination of cards, isn't it? Time Wipe, put my agent back into hand is devastating stuff here for Dominguez, who realistically doesn't have a way to get the job done here. Both lands are going to hit the battlefield here for Jean-Emmanuel, who still hasn't seen a Field of the Dead just yet. No Golos or anything like that. There's a Spellbreaker. Hey, let's get this party started.
Hey, that's 3 damage. That's 3. So now Depraz down to 2. And now a Flying Haster would get the job done here.
Oh boy, Javier Dominguez. He's got some very tense top decks coming up. A Skargan Hellkite would do just nicely, he says.
Yeah, Agent of Treachery is interesting. So if he runs out the Agent of Treachery, he can take the Gruul Spellbreaker, but that means Questing Beast off the top is a lethal attack.
Yes, it does.
Skargan Hellkite is a lethal attack off the top. If he goes...
That's a lot of outs.
That is. But by going with the Realm Cloak Giant route, any haste creature is an out, even a Zertog Goblin.
Yeah, that just seems too risky to open up that many different outs for Javier here. I believe it would be 6 outs. I think he's gone through 1 Beast and 1 Hellkite at this point. Oh, I lied. It's actually 5. He has 3 Skargan Hellkite in the main, not the full 4. Still.
This is extremely close. And you know, Javier, he's just in top deck mode. He's just like, I hope I draw something here.
And it looks like Jean-Emmanuel has enough mana to just do both here, so he's going to run out the agent now, take it, and let's see if Javier Dominguez can find himself a Skargan Hellkite or
Questing
a
Beast.
Questing Beast.
Questing Beast Hellkite.
Off the top of the library. Oh, it's a Pelt Collector. That's not it. Both players down to 2, and that means that Jean-Emmanuel has faded the draw step and can simply crack in for lethal damage here. All that incidental damage added up.
What, that was so incredibly close. And Depraz finding a win there without even finding a Field of the Dead, right?
Never.
Just had a bunch of
Golos.
sweepers, nothing. Yeah, he just did it the old-fashioned way.
Did sweeper, but the key card there was the agent. You know, the agent of treachery was a huge swing in his direction, really both times keeping him alive.
Yeah, and winning game 1 is huge, tremendously huge in this matchup, because after sideboard, he now has a few additional ways to interact in the early game. You see those 2 copies of Devout Decree, there's that Glass Casket, and most importantly, those 3 copies of Ether Gust.
Yeah, the Ether Gust at instant speed are the most critical. The Devout Decrees are kind of like, well, you take a hit from the thing and then you get to kill it, but at least you had an answer.
Yeah, but having access to the Ether Gust means that the threat of potentially just dying to an Embercleave creature no longer exists.
Exactly. Okay, game number 2 incoming. Jean-Emmanuel Depraz up 1-0 over Javier Dominguez, but he's got to win a lot of games to take down Mythic Championship 5. He has to beat Javier not just once, but twice in matches.
Yeah, this looks like a keep given the Once Upon a Time in the hand. Very likely to be able to find a green source here, and you do have kind of that ideal start of having that growth spiral in your hand.
Let's see if he just draws it. Nope, it's a plains off the top of the library, so he's going to fire off Once Upon a Time, looking for a green source of any sort.
No green source.
He did not find it. The Plaza of Harmony will not help, at least at this point. Yikes.
So Plaza of Harmony is a potential way to gain some life if he does draw a gate, because he already has one in hand. Looks like he's going for an untap land. Yeah, I mean, given the fact that you're on the draw and you're looking basically 6 cards deep for a green source, you're a pretty heavy favorite to find that green source. So
he still can, right? If he just peels a forest here. Oh, it was a basic, but it happened to be an island this time, so no growth spiral here for Jean-Emmanuel. Meanwhile, Zerta Goblin hits the battlefield with that +1/+1 counter. And earlier in the weekend, Paul, I heard you explain why they don't do the haste on that.
Yeah, it's very important that you get the Zerta Goblin to be a 3/3 because of the existence of Arboreal Grazer as a chump blocker or a blocker in this matchup. If you make it a 2/2 and Jean-Emmanuel Depraz does play out a green source and plays out the Grazer, you want a 3/3 on the battlefield.
By the way, speaking of green sources, there's a breeding pool off the top of the library now. It's going to cost him 2 precious life, but he is starting to ramp his way up into Castoff and Golos. Next turn, he can cast one or the other.
He's going to take a lot of damage here.
Yes, he is.
This is 7 damage. If Javier draws a green source, that's 11 if he runs out that Questing Beast.
Really curious to see how Javier approaches this next turn, particularly if he finds that untapped green source.
Yeah, if anything, it's actually more likely that he would just cast Stomp on Bone Crusher Giant and also cast Colossus to get in for the damage, because that way he's going to get in for a bunch of damage.
Ooh, it's a Zerta Goblin.
Oh, if Depraz finds a sweeper on turn 5, he can then follow that up with a Questing Beast for a lethal attack.
So what now? You want him to just Colossus one of these creatures, get in for 11, force Jean-Emmanuel to sweep the board, and then if he can get lucky and get that untapped green source, just finish the game.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, okay.
You want to use a spell. And keep in mind, Collision Colossus is a lot worse after sideboard. It's still good.
Yeah, and also I just recognized that Bone Crusher Giant is in fact a giant, and that happens to be Castoff in hand here.
Oh,
for Jean-Emmanuel, which only destroys non-giants.
Wow, so he's going to have to...
Awkward.
Yeah, so he can't actually cast off. You know, that is something to consider, right? The upside of playing something like a Realm Cloak Giant is that you could find it with Once Upon a Time. The downside is there are playable giants in this format.
Indeed. So he has to go for Golos Tireless Pilgrim.
And I think that's just game. If he gets a Field of the Dead, all Javier Dominguez needs to do is run out a Zertog Goblin, attack with everything, and he's going to get in for the appropriate amount of damage for the win here. If he gets a gain land, if he gets a land to gain life, that's still not enough.
Yeah.
He blocks the biggest creature, which is the Bone Crusher Giant, still takes 5.
Yeah, even the Plaza of Harmony isn't active right now with only 1 Guild Gate on the battlefield. It's just not enough. And he just has to get a Boros Guild Gate and pass the turn back. And there is Zertog Goblin. No matter how you add it up, 2 of these creatures are hitting, and that's game number 2 going to Javier Dominguez, who is now 1 game away.
It's kind of interesting. It's tied 1-1, but when one of these players wins, it feels, I mean, the game just goes so much longer, but at the end of the day, a win is a win. Javier winning by turn 4, turn 5. And again, that keep, you know, if you look at that keep, that is a completely reasonable keep from Jean-Emmanuel Depraz. You have that once upon a time. If you look at this deck, it's probably got something like 14 or 15 green sources in it. You're looking 6 cards deep. If you just look at the numbers, you are going to be very, very likely to find that green source for the growth spiral. Now, even if he did find a green source, it's not clear that he would have been able to win that game because his sweeper just wouldn't have been able to deal with that Bone Crusher Giant.
All right, game number 3 incoming. Javier Dominguez and Jean-Emmanuel Depraz each tied up at 1 game apiece. Now, I'm going to remind you, if you're just tuning in here, Javier Dominguez wins this game, and it is over. $100,000, and he will be your Mythic Championship 5 winner. On the other hand, on the other side of the table, though, Jean-Emmanuel Depraz has to win this game, and then we do it all over again and play 1 match to decide it.
And Javier...
Is he on 5?
It looks like he went to 5, but I mean, this is a great
nice 5.
mulligan to 5 here. But
how about Jean-Emmanuel's hand?
His hand is fantastic.
Wow, it's really, really good. Yeah, he's got the growth spiral, plus the lands and Ether Gust to help get up to that Hydrate Crisis. Here's Once Upon a Time now for Javier.
Probably, okay, so now he has land number 3. So he mulliganed to 5, but this is the ideal curve, right? You go Pel Collector into Gruul Harpooner into Gruul Spellbreaker. But again, after sideboard, Depraz just has actual ways to interact here. He can just wait for this Pel Collector to grow and then Ether Gust it on top of Javier's library.
Here it is, Gruul Harpooner as a 3/2.
I think you just want to probably gust this because you don't want to get that counter onto the Pel Collector.
This means you're only taking 1 damage back down to 20, and that's exactly where you want to be if you're Jean-Emmanuel Depraz. So he fires off Ether Gust, and it looks like Javier said, nah, I don't even need it anymore. So let's see what happens now.
Depraz has an additional Ether Gust here to interact, but then he does need to find some action.
There's a Realmclaw Giant that kind of betrayed him last game.
Yeah, and he doesn't have a second white source, so I think he's probably just going to bottom this.
Okay. So now, once again, he has an option on an Ether Gust to buy him more time, or even a Growth Spiral. There's a Gruul Spellbreaker.
I think you're just going to see another Ether Gust here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and John just kind of playing it almost feels like a control deck right now.
Yep.
He just... using the early interaction and then just starting to run out some heavy hitters here. He's just going to run out of Hydra Crisis here for 2, and that's going to be doing a good job of just trading with the Pel Collector. I mean, Dominguez could choose to play out a Gruul Harpooner to fight, but that doesn't feel very good.
So there's that Gruul Spellbreaker back on top and into hand.
I think...
Now, the Gruul Harpooner doesn't have enough to actually take down this Crisis, right? So it's just going to...
Well, they can fight. Oh, the really nice thing about this is the Pel Collector will actually be a 3/3. Right?
Oh.
As the Gruul Harpooner dies,
Right.
so he gets in for 3, so that's pretty nice.
All right, so he does get to actually take advantage of that fight ability much to his benefit, leaving... Oh. You just saw what he drew for the...
Yeah, Ether Gust number 3, so that's going to be very, very strong here. He can just use that, target the Pel Collector, run out of Growth Spiral. And if you can get to land number 6 and just play out that Hydrate Crisis, I mean, he's sitting at 17 life right now.
3rd Ether Gust of the game here for Jean-Emmanuel Depraz, and that is going to be extremely difficult to overcome, given the mulligan of 5 and given the fact that kind of his hopes have been on this Pelt Collector. That's a card that you kind of build up over time, but the Ether Gust just resets it now.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's such a liability at this point for Javier that he put it on the bottom of his library. He'd rather just try to rip something. Well,
there's some hope here, right?
Cleave is actually a thing here.
Yeah, now Javier's in a position where if he draws a creature, that's great. If he draws a land, he can just slam the Embercleave onto it.
Hey.
And Depraz has used all 3 of the Aethergust that he's brought in after sideboard.
This is actually, that was a really interesting draw there from Dominguez. Probably one of the only cards that he could draw at this point where you could go, wait a second, I see a potential line of play that gets you rolling here. That was Growth Spiral on end step for Jean-Emmanuel, who finds Circuitous Route. He's on 5 lands with Growth Spiral and a pair of Hydroid Krasis as well.
Yeah, the Embercleave, yeah, like you said, I think that might have just been the best possible draw.
Definitely.
He's in he has a real chance here. I mean, Depraz had a fantastic start here. But now,
I tell you, if
Embercleave,
Javier
there it is,
Dominguez
just slam it on.
can actually pull off the win from this horrendous mulligan
8.
to 5, it would be a miracle. And in he comes for 8 damage. Jean-Emmanuel Depraz needs to do something, and soon.
So he can play a Krasis that's a 5/5, gain 2, go to 8, play Field of the Dead, make an additional token. So he'll have 7 toughness, so he'll have another turn. He'll get some additional draw steps, so he's in an okay position. Now, Javier, of course, also still has great draws here, right? If he finds Collision Colossus,
yeah, baby.
that's the combo that you want.
Oh, man. And I got to say, if you're sitting in Javier's seat, you are thrilled to be in this position after the way this game has gone.
He mulled a 5.
He actually has outs to win the game.
Just this right now, he can potentially win if he draws Collision Colossus.
Let's see if he can find it. Oh, it's just a forest this time. Now, is that just going to mean he's going to hang home then, or is it worth it for him to try to slam through and clear out the creatures on the other side?
Well, Depraz has to block.
Right.
And if he does, he's going to be able to get the Hydroid Krasis off the battlefield and the token. And now he's in a position where he needs to top deck a creature and equip the Embercleave. But this has bought Depraz a lot of time here. I think this was the very crucial turn. Javier absolutely needed to draw threat that turn.
Yep. And he couldn't find it this time. So the question is, can Jean-Emmanuel capitalize on what has been a very good draw for him? We saw 3 copies of Aethergust cast by him, and he's been sort of routinely moving his land count up, exactly how this deck wants to do it. Looked like it was over for Dominguez, and then he had a glimmer of hope, but now you see a look on his face. He's shaking his head, looking at that forest in his hand and going, ugh, I just needed it to be Collision Colossus.
Yeah, Dominguez needs Questing Beast or Skargan Hellkite. Those are the 2 cards that he really, really wants to draw right now. And Depraz, at this point, knowing that he's ahead, just kind of thinking about what are the possible creatures that Javier can draw that he can attach that Embercleave onto.
Right, it costs 3 to equip Embercleave, and you'll have 3 mana available. So this is probably a multi-turn process here if you're sitting in Dominguez's seat. In the meantime, the ground is getting very gummed up very quickly. That's Golos. Get a second field, get 2 zombies. He has Fabled Passage in his hand to represent even more zombies here, as well as Growth Spiral.
So if Depraz plays the Fabled Passage and Growth Spiral's in the Breeding Pool, that represents 6 zombies. So that's 12 damage, along with the 2 that he has in play. So that's 12 plus 4, 16. So he actually has 19 damage. So he's very close to lethal. But if he happens to hit a Field of the Dead here off this Growth Spiral, that would be lethal.
That would have been enough for next turn, where there's really no draws for Javier to win this turn.
So Javier absolutely needs Skargan Hellkite.
Yeah.
That's probably the card he wants.
Right.
Oh.
Mountain isn't it, and it looks like, wow, Jean-Emmanuel Depraz is going to get away with one here and take this first match down against Javier Dominguez. But the good news for Javier and Gruul Smash fans around the world is that he's going to have to do it again, Jean-Emmanuel, if he's going to win this thing. There's Hydroid Krasis to well and truly put this thing completely out of range. 16, 19, get you down to 1, and there's just nothing left for Javier Dominguez at this point.
I mean, look at how quickly this deck can just turn it around.
Unbelievable. And he's going to pass the turn back, and sure, it's another mountain off the top, but that is match number 1 going to Jean-Emmanuel Depraz. Now, he's got a little more work ahead of him today, but that was a huge step forward in his bid.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just playing against this Gruul deck, your heart just is always pumping because there's always that chance that something off the top is going to be flying with haste or questing or unblockable. There's just so many different ways this deck can kill you out of nowhere. Managing your life total is extremely important. But Jean-Emmanuel Depraz just kind of had the perfect hand game 3, honestly. He had all the interaction early, drew all 3 copies of the Aether Gust, which bought him just enough time to turn it around and then take over in the late game.
And of course, it's not a bad thing for us either. We're talking about maximum excitement here. We're going to get a chance to see another match after this. You expect similar here in the second match. Consistent stuff here from Jean-Emmanuel, but those explosive turns from Dominguez that can completely turn things around.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, those sideboard cards were very, very critical from Depraz. Having access to Aether Gust and just cheap interaction is huge. So the fact that he was able to steal game 1 when he doesn't have any of that was really, really important for this match.
Absolutely. So we're going to get the deciding match coming up right after this.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Habla Sebastián. No me considero un gran cantante. En mi familia hay varios músicos y no tengo muy buen oído, entonces me cuesta a veces escuchar si la nota que canto es la afinada o no. Pero igual me gusta cantar, por más que no cante muy bien. Manejando es cuanto más fuerte canto, creo, cuando estoy solo en el auto. De chico coleccionaba de todo, monedas viejas, estampillas, pero hasta tenía algunos bichos que coleccionaba así como secos, pero con el tiempo y bueno, mudándome y viajando me he ido desprendiendo de la mayoría de las cosas e intento no tener muchas cosas que no use. A veces me gusta mucho nadar, entonces pienso que con cualquier pez, por lo menos si estoy en el agua me siento bastante un pez, pero también puede ser con un koala o... vamos a dejarlo ahí.
Hey, this is John. I always have this recurring dream where something's wrong with my deck or I can't find my deck and the round is about to start. It's like, it's really bizarre. I'm like, oh, it's a dream, you know, not going to get a match loss. Yeah, I finished law school about 1.5 years ago, and then I ended up joining the MPL and kind of putting that on hold for a minute. Plan initially was to go work for a firm, but then, yeah, things changed drastically. My parents hadn't really watched too much in the past because it was always sort of a side thing for me. But then when I started taking it more seriously, it was just very easy for them, especially with Arena. So when I go to tournaments, I actually like to kind of take in the city, especially the food and whatever local things there are to do. I don't know. I've always tried to treat pro tours more like a vacation with a tournament within it, you know? I eat out a lot, actually probably too much, like 1 to 2 times a day. And I'm trying to take after Andre Mengucci. He does the Mengucci cuisine, so I want to make Rolf cuisine. It's going to have a lot more fast food, like not as high quality of food as Mengucci. My mom said she thinks I look like Ryan from The Office, but I don't really see that at all.
I've got 5 attackers, you got no blockers, and you're dead. You need to train.
I don't need to train.
Maybe not. But you do need a training montage. To win in the arena, you have to be the arena.
Okay.
You must sharpen your skills. Here, eat this.
That's a cauliflower.
It's a superfood. All right, come on, pump them, keep those knees going. Oh, you punch like a beetle.
Now that we've covered spells, let's talk about flying.
I'm doing it!
Rise and shine. It's magic time. Fire! And fire!
Done.
Sophia, don't you quit on me. Welcome to the challenge.
Rise and shine. It's magic time.
Up that hill! Move those zombies!
Yes!
Fire! Fire! Fire!
Thank you.
Don't thank me, Sophia. The magic was inside you all along.
What are you doing?
Nothing.
Whoa, nice combo. Have you been training?
A little.
If you love a challenge, you'll love Magic the Gathering Arena. Welcome the challenge. Download free.
And welcome back to coverage here at Mythic Championship 5. Marshall Selective with Paul Cheon. Thank you so much for joining us at coverage of the Grand Finals. We've got one more match to bring you on the weekend, and this is the one that's going to decide it all. Jean-Emmanuel Depraz versus Javier Dominguez for $100,000. And of course that trophy, right? The big career accomplishment, the thing that they could never take away. You might spend the money, they'll never take that trophy from you.
Yeah, Javier already with a world championship under his belt, but still looking for that Mythic championship title, and we are one match away.
That's right. Wow. Didn't go the way that he wanted there in that third game. He made it interesting with the Ember Cleave, but the mulligan to 5 plus the triple Ether Gust from Jean-Emmanuel Depraz made it very unlikely for him to win it. He couldn't quite get the job done. But this is a matchup that he likes. This is why he brought this deck to the table. He said, I'm going to bring something assertive with a bunch of haste creatures. I'm going to kill my opponents who are playing Golos, and that's exactly what he got here. The question is, can he get the job done? A mulligan here from Jean-Emmanuel.
Yeah, but this is a reasonable hand to mulligan into. It's really important for you to try to have that growth spiral early, and now he's probably going to put the Agent Treachery in the bottom, but he's got that growth spiral. That Fabled Passage can find them either a blue or green source. He can cast Once Upon a Time to try to find the other one to try to get the ball rolling.
Now, for Javier Dominguez, he needs to get the ball rolling too, and he does. He finds Pelt Collector with his own Once Upon a Time, and that was really a key piece here. He needs to get something rolling.
Yeah, it's extremely important. The games where you have this turn one and you don't, I think the win percentage swings massively, especially in this matchup.
Yeah, Brian Kibler said that he tested with his deck a bunch just in preparation to cast this tournament, and he said he thought that was one of the most important cards, is to get a Pelt Collector down on turn one and let it start swinging, because this deck is really slow that he's facing down. They don't do much for the first few turns.
Yeah, it's really important to get your opponent's life total low enough where, you know, oftentimes the Bant Golos deck will be able to cast their sweeper and still be alive, but you want to get them low enough to the point where then you can follow that up with a haste creature for the final few points of damage.
Okay, Pelt Collector chips in for 2 on turn 2 after the Crawl Harpooner hits the battlefield. Agent of Treachery off the top of the library for Jean-Emmanuel. That is not going to be relevant for quite a while, if at all. Looks like it's just going to be a growth spiral here, but he still hasn't cast Once Upon a Time.
Yeah, this is the ideal start for Javier. He's on the play with the Pelt Collector turn 1, followed by the Gruul Harpooner on turn 2. He really, really wants to find that extra creature this turn.
Yeah, Gruul Spellbreaker would have been perfect. Instead, it's Embercleave.
Also not bad. He actually does have the combo of Embercleave plus Collision Colossus. Looks like he's probably going to just be attacking here. He can cast a Once Upon a Time. It makes sense to just run it out now because, you know, there is the possibility that you hit 4 lands and the second Pelt Collector, and if you do, you can just play it out. Okay, it looks like he's going to go for Colossus here instead. So let's take a look. This is 9 damage. This would get Depraz down to 9, and the next turn he does have the lands, the mana, to play Embercleave. And I think if John has absolutely nothing, that might be lethal.
And currently that is the case. Maybe Arboreal Grazer changes the math a little?
Yeah, it's a little bit interesting because you know he's going to play out the Growth Spiral this turn, run out that Field of the Dead. He does need land number 5 to play out that Golos, but he might also be concerned because that was an extremely aggressive line that Javier just took. Wait, turn 3, you're just going to pump your creature? You must have an Embercleave, right? So that is something that he's mindful of here.
Gains 1 life off of Blossoming Sands. Ooh, there's a time wipe.
Yeah, but Embercleave is lethal next turn.
Is it too late? Yeah,
if he plays land number 4, attacks with both creatures, put Embercleave on the Gruul Harpooner, that's exactly 10 damage.
The Plaza of Harmony isn't going to gain him any life. He's just in desperation mode now, and he has to fire off Once Upon a Time.
He needs a Grazer.
He found a Grazer.
Okay, that will buy him time. He can play the Grazer. That is a blocker, and then next turn, and he has a Field of the Dead that he can play. But also keep in mind, he doesn't have a second white source for that time wipe.
No, he doesn't.
That Plaza of Harmony does not tap for white mana. He needs to find either an untapped white source or a white Guildgate.
Okay, well, you know, Javier's plan seems to be in play here, though. Gruul Smash, that's the name of the game. He's going to attack with both of his creatures.
Yeah, but Javier's still in just commanding position here,
Absolutely.
right? Because even though this is not a lethal attack, and even if Depraz finds the white source for the time wipe, all Javier needs to do is find any haste creature, and he's going to win. Because this is going to put Depraz down to 2 if he puts the Embercleave on the Gruul Harpooner. So any haste creature does it, and also just a Bone Crusher Giant also does it.
That was a forest off the top of the library. Now, Golos, of course, is an option. Is it too late?
It feels like it's too late.
He can play put that in front of that. That's 8 damage coming across. It's just too much.
Right. Yeah, I think that's it. Javier on the play. Depraz with a very awkward start, unable to cast that time wipe.
He can't even get a zombie here either, can he? Because it happened to be a forest, which he already has in play.
Tapping the Plaza of Harmony just to make sure it doesn't give you white.
Oh, I like that. I like the test tap there.
Does he? And I think typically the decks play 1 to 2 life gain lands.
He does have one. He has a Tranquil Cove.
But I don't...
I think it still leaves him just dead. Because it's 8 trampling over Golos, which is exactly 3.
And he also had a second forest, which doesn't give him a zombie.
That's what I said. Yeah, he doesn't even get a zombie.
And of course, we get to finally see it, right?
Oh, the Collision Colossus. It's not necessary, but it is sweet. Javier
the main phase.
Dominguez says, I've got it. And Jean-Emmanuel says, oops, that's 1 to the good for Javier Dominguez. But now, and this is key, we're going back to the sideboards, where Jean-Emmanuel was able to steal game 1 in the first match without the help of his sideboard. And you mentioned it right after. That was massive for him. Now it went the way that it's, air quotes, supposed to go here in game 1.
So yeah, with the addition of all these sideboard cards, I think Depraz has a much better chance. And I think if he's on the play, you know, it's even possible, it's even conceivable that maybe he's slightly ahead after sideboard on the play. But if he wins this game, we're going to go to game 3 where Javier is going to be on the play and everything changes.
Okay, let's see what happens. And let's not forget, in game 3 of the first match, Javier mulliganed to 5 and still gave him a little bit of a run there. So this is fantastic. We are playing a best 2 out of 3 match to decide it right now. The fact that Javier was the top seed or the leader coming in to the grand finals meant that he had to be beaten twice. He was beaten once, but we're going to find out right now. if Jean-Emmanuel Depraz can get the job done. How does this opener look, Paul? Slow.
It's a bit rough. He doesn't have a white source for that Devout Decree. He needs to find a land for the Beanstalk Giant, but given that if he doesn't find a land, he just loses. I mean,
this is still slow even if he does.
Right.
Is he keeping it?
Ooh, this
is the type of hand that if you keep, you have to just pray your opponent doesn't have their good draw.
Yeah,
because you will not beat it with this.
Right. And many of the white sources also come into play tapped.
Yeah, and he needs
and he doesn't have
them.
it.
Yeah, the Devout Decree can stem the bleeding, that's for sure. But
if he does find a land, I mean, this is what he's thinking. If he finds a land, he can play the Beanstalk Giant, get in land.
He kept it.
Then play Circuitous Route. All right, let's see how this works out for him.
Once again, it's a once upon a time opener here for Dominguez. He does not have that amazing draw. Now, the once upon a time might help him, though.
Yeah. Wants a Pelt Collector here. Get that going. Or a 2-drop. That's what he's looking for.
Too. He finds a Pelt Collector. Now, he currently doesn't have much to do on turn 2. Just plays Stomp, which would end up going upstairs. But the Gruul smashings will begin on turn 3 here with Gruul Spellbreaker into Shifting Ceratops.
Okay, and that was big. If Javier found an aggressive 2-drop that turn, it would have been so big. But now, I mean, this isn't the quickest start here for Javier. He's going to be able to cast Stomp to deal 2 damage, but Depraz was able to chain back-to-back lands here, so now he has the ability. He can play Fertile Footsteps from the Beanstalk Giant, find the white source, and now he's going to be able to interact. So things not looking that bad anymore for Depraz.
Yeah, I think he kind of got away with that first stage, right? If it was one drop, big 2-drop, and Javier had 5 power over there or something, he'd be in big trouble. But as it stands, he does get to use his mana, and he does get to follow up with either a Gruul Spellbreaker or a Bone Crusher Giant. Generally speaking, you'd want to go for the Spellbreaker here because you can get that extra value from the Giant later, but we'll see.
Yeah, we're at that pivotal moment, though, where Depraz has the 4 lands in play. So he's thinking about potential sweepers, right? So Bone Crusher Giant makes sense if Depraz has Realm Cloak Giant in hand. We saw that be very relevant.
He drew the untapped white mana.
And it's all happening exactly. So now Depraz has to figure out how he wants to sequence his turns now. The Realm Cloak Giant doesn't do a whole lot here, right? So it looks like he's going to go for Golos here, which is a great blocker against that Bone Crusher Giant. And then now he has 6 lands in play. Next turn, he can put up to 3 zombies in play by playing the Breeding Pole and then casting that Circuitous Route.
Yeah, Javier actually, that play actually ended up working out against the Realm Cloak Giant because he had the second white off the top. But the bad news for Javier, Golos in hand for Jean-Emmanuel kind of brick-walled his play for the turn. Yeah, I like where Jean-Emmanuel sits here.
Yeah, Javier is probably now thinking, okay, do I want to trade my Bone Crusher Giant for the Golos? Attack, block, then use Stomp, but that just doesn't seem great.
Golos, not real a threat to get activated next turn. There's no red or black mana on the battlefield here for Jean-Emmanuel, but still, it does feel bad to let your opponent keep a Golos.
Okay, yep, it looks okay. It looks like he's going for it here. Wants to get that Golos off the battlefield. And remember, if the Bone Crusher Giant does die, the Pelt Collector does grow.
Oh, it's another Pelt, all right. Big one. Javier is keeping Shifting Ceratops in hand as well. He'd prefer to play it when he has that 5th mana so he can give it haste right away and guarantee a big attack. There's Stomp to finish off Golos. And, as you mentioned, the Pelt Collector is going to grow. Hydroid Krasis was the draw. That's not bad.
Yeah.
He can make a 5/5, or he can go for Circuitous Route.
Yeah, things are looking quite good here. Circuitous Route seems like a very reasonable thing to do here. You're going to just further advance the board, so you can put 3 zombies into play this turn, and next turn you're going to have all the mana in the world to work with, right? You're going to be able to potentially cast the Sweeper or cast the Beanstalk Giant and have Devout Decree up. So a lot of different things that you can do by casting the Circuitous Route, and not a lot of cards that you're concerned about.
Is your worst case an Embercleave here?
Yes.
That's the card that you're like, well, I'd take 8, but I'm still survive it.
Right. You could also try to figure things out, right? If Javier had something like a Questing Beast, he probably would have played it last turn and attacked. So you could also deduce that it's pretty unlikely that Javier has that in his hand. So you can kind of lean on the zombies, at least for this turn, to kind of stem the bleeding.
Yeah, dying from this position, extremely unlikely. So he's going to go for the Circuitous Route. He gets 3 zombies. He passes the turn.
And Javier doesn't have, I mean, he can play one of his big creatures, and then with the shifting Ceratops, the Pelt Collector would have haste, and then he will have 2 4+ power creatures. So Depraz would actually have to double block to remove one of these creatures.
Yeah, the Pelt Collector has Trample now, although it doesn't look like it's going to be super relevant if it gets double blocked. It is a little bit interesting, though.
Yeah, I mean,
you'd prefer to get the shifting Ceratops off the board, but then the Pelt Collector grows again.
yeah, I think, you know, and keep in mind, the shifting Ceratops doesn't have Trample. The ability lets you choose between Trample, Haste, or Reach. So this makes a lot of sense. I think you really just want to preserve your life total as much as possible because of the threat of that Embercleave.
Ooh, hello, Time Wipe. I wonder if he's going to go for a big Krasis and then the next turn Time Wipe, bounce Krasis. That's a line of play you'll see pretty often.
Yeah, that is something to consider, and...
He can make a 7/7.
Yeah, 7/7.
Seems good. He's also likely to hit a land here, which he did.
The great part about 7/7 here is that even if Javier Dominguez finds something like an Embercleave, sure, it'll deal some damage, but the 7/7 should still be able to clean up the shifting Ceratops.
Things looking very good for Jean-Emmanuel here. What?
Wait. Shifting Ceratops has protection from blue, of course.
Oh, of course
the Krasis can't even block it.
That's
so,
right.
So this will be able to get in for some damage.
So he's going to get in for 3 here, but he didn't find the big devastating play like we were talking about here with an Embercleave or something like that. And let's not forget that he did gain 3 life as
oh, yeah,
well.
this is...
Oh, and a second Field of the Dead is really nasty. Yes, shifting Ceratops has protection from blue. Does not have protection from zombies, however.
Yeah, Javier in commanding position now.
Oh,
He's going to Time Wipe, bounce his own Hydroid Krasis.
Jean-Emmanuel's in.
Jean-Emmanuel, rather. Destroy all the other creatures, return Hydroid Krasis, then play Field of the Dead to put 2 additional zombies onto the battlefield. And then there's even the chance of finding more zombies as he has multiple copies of Growth Spiral in hand.
This is hard to watch. You know, when this deck finally hits its stride, it's like unbelievable how powerful it can be. The turns that it has are just out of this world powerful. And, you know, at this point, this is kind of what you signed up for. If you're Javier, you drew a Pelt Collector, and they have a Spellbreaker. You know this game's over. There's no way to come back from this point, but you got to play it out.
Yeah. There's always the chance. There's always the chance you can maybe string together Skargan, Hellkite plus Embercleave.
Yep.
Hope that your opponent has nothing. Of course, we see the Devout Decree in hand, but...
Here we go, Growth Spiral number 1. Let's try it again. Oh, he missed on lands. Finds another Growth Spiral, but there's another Time Wipe. There's still the Giant. Now it's just a matter of Jean-Emmanuel making sure that he focuses here, doesn't leave himself open, because as you mentioned, there are some kind of stupid things that Javier's deck can do where you're like, oh my God, I really thought I couldn't lose. And then all of a sudden I took 19 or whatever. From this position, not so much, especially if Devout Decree is used on the Gruul Spellbreaker. That's going to leave Javier with a 2/2 and an unknown card in hand. There's just really no way to lose from that position.
At this point, I mean, Depraz is not... And he even found an Ether Gust, which he can draw by casting the Growth Spiral.
Yeah. So game number 2 is going to go to Jean-Emmanuel Depraz, trying to defeat Javier Dominguez twice in a row in a matchup that, well, Javier built this deck to try to beat. This is a tall order, but we're going to get a game number 3.
This is it. This is the final game.
$100,000.
Winner of this game will be your Mythic Championship 5 champion.
Wow. I am super impressed by Jean-Emmanuel, by the way. Fighting, staying patient, not losing his cool at any point. And Javier's like, just give me that really great Gruul draw, just the once.
Gruul players, he's only thinking one way right now. He's already looking in his mind. He's envisioning the Pelt Collector, 2-drop, 3-drop Embercleave draw.
Yes.
That's what he wants.
Yes, that's the one. He gets to be on the play for this last one. Javier, all he has to do is win this game, and he can get it. By the way, he's been scraping in all weekend. 4-3 makes day 2. 4-3 makes the top 8. Does he have the one to get the job done here? Double Zertog Goblin, Hellkite, Embercleave.
He's got the Embercleave, and this is another tricky hand for Depraz. Growth Spiral is extremely important, but he doesn't have any of the tools in his hand right now to fight it. But, all right, here we go. He's going to be relying on the top of his deck here to find him some action.
Oh, baby. This one's going to be interesting because right now, Jean-Emmanuel does not have a clear game plan ahead of him. He's going to cast Growth Spiral and see what happens. Here comes Zertog Goblin. It's a 3-3, pass the turns, there's a grazer, and that's why you make it into a 3-3. That was big.
Yeah, so now it's just going to be a chump blocker, and now the question is the Pro going to run out the grazer here or just play out the growth spiral?
He doesn't actually have a second green source, does he?
Right. Could potentially find it off the growth spiral.
Chat says, believe the cleave. They have made it very clear what what they're rooting for here. It's all Gruul smash faces in chat. They want to see Zerta, Goblin, and friends get the job done. It's going to be growth spiral here for Jean-Emmanuel. What's off the top of the library? It was a mountain, but he gets to curve into Spellbreaker.
And this is a good clock. And
this is it.
And next turn, he's threatening Embercleave. That's a lot of damage.
This was the draw that Javier Dominguez wanted. It wasn't perfect, but it has the tools needed to get the job done. Double Field of the Dead in hand now for Jean-Emmanuel.
Depraz really wants an interactive spell here if he can find it. Nope.
It was just another land. Now he can drop 2 lands on the battlefield this turn thanks to the Grazer, but he is going to be under immense pressure as this Embercleave is going to hit one of these creatures, make a 4/4 double strike trampler in addition to the 3/3.
And you know, sometimes that's the cost, right? You're playing 29 lands. He kept a land-heavy hand, and so far, he hasn't been able to find any action. But that's just more likely when you play that many lands in this deck. So next turn, Javier's going to have a huge turn. He's going to be able to play Embercleave on one of his creatures, and what is that? That's 11 damage coming in.
Yep. Javier Dominguez, all he can do is patiently wait. Jean-Emmanuel going through the motions here. Look, he doesn't want to play the island. He needs to diversify his land count. If he plays a Fabled Passage, he can go get a basic land and thin his library of 1 land card, which he doesn't want to drop, but maybe it ends up being important later after he gets Field of the Dead online. Another forest off the top of the library here for Dominguez, but it is time to smash.
And he has such a good post-Wrath play, too. If there's a sweeper next turn, he can just slam Skargan Hellkite or play a Zerta Goblin, give it haste, and equip the Embercleave.
Now, he is just go for the Embercleave here, right? Because,
oh, yeah.
Okay, because there is, of course, Ether Gust. Think about it. Look at his face. He says, don't Ether Gust me, bro. Don't do it.
Don't.
And it hits
Do you
the
have
battlefield.
it? Do you
Now,
have
it's
it?
not over yet, though, because remember, he can still do it. And he's like, oh, it actually
gotta be
gets
feeling great
to
here
hit.
now.
Javier Dominguez knows that that was a huge step forward for him. Look at his face. He knows exactly what's up. And it's going to have to be something huge here.
He needs a
sweeper. He's got to find a sweeper right now.
Sweeper doesn't do it either because you can play Zerta Goblin, give it haste, equip, and I think this is it.
Embercleave is already on the battlefield, Paul. You're 100% right. He has the mana to make a 2/2 haste, pay 3. That's a 3/3 double strike. And Javier Dominguez is on the edge of his seat. He knows how close he is to winning Mythic Championship 5 and locking up $100,000 in addition to that.
I think the Pro needs to play a Hydrate Krasis for 2 and try to find an Ether Gust to get that Embercleave off the battlefield. That might buy him a turn. He can have a 2/2 Krasis, block the Skargan Hellkite, and he would take and gain a life. No, that's still 7 damage.
Jean-Emmanuel going through the motions here, trying to find any possible way out of this mess. Javier knows he cleared a huge hurdle when Jean-Emmanuel did not have Ether Gust in his hand.
Okay.
And now he's just waiting.
If he does it for 4, it's over.
It's
Javier
over. And look
Dominguez
at
slams
Javier.
Skargan Hellkite, and that's going to be it.
Javier Dominguez sits back in his chair. All he has to do is play his mountain. He's counting it up.
Now, adding
He's
it up.
100%
Running the numbers.
sure. It is time to Gruul smash. Good game at the queue here for
He's getting ready.
Depraz.
Just got to slam the haster.
He's counted it up. He knows how much damage he can do this turn. There's Skargan Hellkite, everything in the red zone, and Javier Dominguez is your Mythic Championship 5 winner. Congratulations, Javier.
$100,000. That Embercleave. Wow.
Unbelievable stuff. It really came down to that turn, Paul.